Have you ever trusted someone so much, for so many years, that it never even crossed your mind that they could hide a secret that would destroy everything? I never thought that after 32 years of marriage, he would cheat on me. Silence. But what seemed like the end of me, and I swear for a few days, I really thought it was just the beginning of one of the biggest turning points of my life. I'm not talking about a teenage love, the kind that comes and goes. I'm talking about a lifetime built side by side. A house full of photos on the walls, birthdays celebrated with homemade cake, vacations planned in advance, bills split, promises whispered in whispers. A story like so many out there, or maybe like yours. The difference? Mine fell apart after just one letter. Yes, a letter. Hidden among old papers in the dresser he thought I would never touch. She wrote, "I'll see you on Saturday, as always," and signed it with a heart. Have you ever been there? Have you ever had the ground pulled out from under your feet by someone you trusted blindly? In that moment, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't break anything. I just froze, as if my soul had left my body for a few minutes. I stood there, holding that piece of paper like a weapon, and in a way, it was. A weapon against everything I believed to be real. Stay with me until the end, because what you discover now may surprise you. What no one tells you about betrayal is that it doesn't just hurt because of the lie. It hurts because it questions time. You start to wonder, did he cheat on me just now? Or has it been his whole life? It hurts because you feel alone, even surrounded by children, grandchildren, neighbors, and you think no one will understand. It hurts because it's not just about him. It's about you, about who you were before all this happened. But let me tell you a secret. Pain was my greatest teacher. And what I discovered after that letter changed everything. And it wasn't just about him. It was about me. As the days went by, as I tried to hide my puffy eyes behind my reading glasses and smile at the kids as if nothing had happened, I began to hear a little voice inside me. A voice that said, "You're still here. You can still do it." This story you're about to hear isn't just about infidelity. It's about reunion, about rebirth. Because sometimes life needs to break us into 1,000 pieces to show that we can rebuild ourselves, stronger, more beautiful, more true. And look, if I'm here today telling you all this, with my heart at peace and my hands steady, it's because I discovered something that maybe you also need to hear. Something that deep down you may already know, but haven't had the courage to accept. Or maybe you've never heard someone say it out loud. You deserve more, and you can start over. But calm down. It's not as simple as it seems. Because before I could blossom, I had to face my roots, the pains of childhood, the silences of youth, the choices I made out of fear of being alone. And yes, I had to look him in the eye. But I'll tell you about that in a bit. Are you still there? So take a deep breath. Because what comes next is the part of the story that no one saw. Not even my family knows everything that happened in the days that followed that letter. And you'll be the first person to listen. Let's go back to that morning. The kettle was on the stove, the TV was on low volume, and I didn't know yet that I was about to change my entire life. The kettle whistled, the smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen, but that morning, nothing tasted good. I stared out the window, as if hoping time would wash away that feeling. That mixture of anger, sadness, and an emptiness that couldn't be explained. And that's when we start to think, was I the only one? Has anyone else gone through this and also remained silent? That's why, if this topic resonates with you, if any of my words touched a chord within you, leave a comment below with what resonated most with you. It could be a memory, a question, or just a rant. Because look, reading what you share reminds me that I'm not alone, and neither are you. The truth is, this exchange we have here is worth more than gold. When you comment, when you like, when you subscribe, you know what happens? This story finds other people who might be going through something similar, and that might be exactly what they need to hear to keep going. So if this conversation has resonated with you so far, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you want to keep hearing real, profound life stories with that touch of truth that only those who have lived it can tell, subscribe to the channel. Your presence here is what keeps all this going. It's like shining a light at the end of a dark hallway for those who haven't yet found their way. And now, let me tell you what happened that night, because that's when it really hit me. I remember exactly the sound of the door opening. He walked in like it was just another afternoon. His shirt smelled of the same cologne he'd been wearing since the 90s, his key jingling on the door hook, and he gave me that same tired, hello, without even looking me in the eye. But that day, I already knew. I knew the secret. I knew the betrayal. I knew that everything we built had a crack, the kind no one sees, but that one day brings the house down. I could have screamed. I could have thrown the truth in his face right then and there, with the letter in my hands, my voice cracking, and the pain in my eyes. But I took a deep breath and went to the stove. I served dinner as usual. 3 spoonfuls of rice, 2 of beans, roast chicken. We sat at the table as if nothing had happened, and perhaps that hurt more than any argument, because sometimes silence is the loudest way to scream. I'm a grandmother of 7. I live in rural Georgia, and this story shaped the woman I am today. But this didn't happen overnight, and I'm no saint. I've also had my angry days, thoughts of revenge, moments when I wanted to disappear. But one thing time has taught me, and years of running a full house have confirmed, is that transformation comes when we face what hurts without running away. I'm the kind of person who still plants basil on the windowsill and bakes apple pie on Sundays, who still uses a recipe book and remembers birthdays by heart. But I'm also the kind of person who learned that strength has nothing to do with noise. It has to do with what you do when no one is watching, with the decisions you make when no one applauds. And at that dinner, my decision was to listen, to observe, to understand the truth hidden behind his eyes. Because not all betrayal begins with desire. Sometimes it begins with cowardice, with the inability to face one's own emptiness and ask for help. I'm not here to justify it. I'm here to tell you how I got through it and came out the other side with something no one could ever take from me: awareness. And it's funny how awareness changes everything, isn't it? When you realize you no longer have to accept the role they gave you, you write another one. I started to see the little things differently. The way he avoided talking about feelings, the times he left me alone at family parties, saying he was too tired, the birthdays he forgot, the flowers he never brought again. I'd accepted this for so long, thinking it was normal, that it was just his way. But the truth? It's just that deep down, I was afraid to look at myself and realize that I had left myself aside. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because when we start to really listen to ourselves, everything changes. I went back to writing in my old journal, the one I kept tucked away among cookbooks. I started walking alone in the late afternoon, just to hear my own thoughts. I rediscovered the pleasure of getting ready just for me. Red lipstick, hair tied back with a floral scarf, perfume behind my ears, even if no one would smell it. The betrayal hurt, yes, but it was also the trigger for me to reclaim parts of myself that had been forgotten in the background of my daily routine. Things I had put off until later, and that later never arrived. And I realized it wasn't just about him. It was about me. The impact of all this isn't limited to the end of a marriage. It goes beyond that. It affects how you see yourself in the mirror, how you position yourself in the world, how you talk to yourself before bed. The journey back to yourself is silent but powerful. And believe me, it changes everything. Maybe you're experiencing something like this too, or you've experienced it and held it so well that you no longer remember where you hid the pain. But it's there, waiting for you to have the courage to look at it without rushing, without judgment, with the same care you take when taking a cake out of the oven and testing it with a toothpick. Because deep down, we know. You know when something has gone sour. You know when you can't keep pretending anymore. And you know deep down in your heart that it is possible to start over, even when it seems too late. Comment below. I'm on this journey too, just so I know I'm not talking to myself. There's more I need to tell you. We met in high school. He wore a worn-out leather jacket and always carried a book under his arm, not because he liked to read, but because he thought it made him seem more interesting. And, lo and behold, it worked. I fell in love the first time he offered me a piece of gum in the hallway and told me my hair looked like a movie star I'd never met. Back then, life was different. We were captivated by little things, you know? A little note folded in 4, a lingering look during recess, "Can I walk you home?" that made my heart skip a beat. He was my first everything. First kiss, first boyfriend, first "I love you," said with a shaky voice, hidden behind the school barn, smelling of wet grass and nervous in my stomach. I remember he wrote me a letter when we'd been together for 6 months. 6 months, as if it were an eternity. He said he dreamed of a white house with a porch, 2 dogs, and Sundays with pancakes. I believed every word. The truth is, when we love for the first time, we love with a purity that we can't even imagine how fragile it can be. At graduation, he waited for me with a bouquet of daisies and said that, if I wanted, he would take care of me for the rest of my life. I responded with a long kiss, the kind that makes the world seem to stand still for a second. My mother cried in the background, overcome with emotion. She said he was the kind of guy you never meet twice, and I, foolish or overly romantic, thought I'd won the love lottery. We married young. The church was packed, and my dress was hand-sewn by an aunt who sewed like a painter. White, long-sleeved, with a light blue ribbon sewn inside. For luck, she said. He cried when he saw me walk in. Those tears, which at the time seemed so sincere, now live trapped in a drawer of my memory that I open carefully. In the beginning, everything was sweet. We shared a bed and dreams. We made plans scribbled on coffee napkins. He said he would open a workshop, that he would own his own business, and I, a simple-minded dreamer, just wanted a noisy, happy family. The mornings were slow and sweet, freshly brewed coffee, the radio playing softly, a goodbye kiss with a promise to return soon. I remember the letters. Even after we were married, he would write to me when he traveled for work, words full of longing, crude drawings of hearts, phrases like, "counting the minutes until we return to our little corner." I kept them all. I still have some, yellowed with age, hidden between the pages of a cookbook I rarely open. Sometimes I think about throwing them away. Other times I think they're part of my story, my truth, even if it was only partial. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because idealizing someone is like building a sandcastle, beautiful, magical, but fragile in the face of the first strong wind. And I idealized. I idealized so much that, for many years, I ignored the small signs, the change in tone of voice, the distance disguised as fatigue, the less frequent touch, the gaze that no longer sparkled when I entered the room. But, going back to those early years, I lived in a world where love was an eternal promise, where pain came from outside, not inside the house. I never imagined that the ones who hurt the most could be the very ones who swore to protect. And that's why nostalgia hurts so much, because it mixes what was with what we wish had continued to be. On our wedding anniversaries, he would bring me flowers. Sometimes roses, other times chrysanthemums, which I hated but pretended to like so as not to seem ungrateful. And that's what I often did. I kept quiet to keep the peace. I nullified myself a little each year, like someone ripping pages from their own book so that the other person's story would remain beautiful. But you know, today, I understand. What seemed like a fairy tale was actually a narrative I'd been feeding myself. A narrative built on expectations, silences, and omissions that only became clear after the pain. The love I felt was real, yes, but the love he returned, that, I still don't know if it was ever complete. Comment below. This resonates with me. I want to know if these words resonate in your heart. There's still something I need to tell you. I pretended not to see. It's hard to say, but it's true. Pretending is a way of surviving when facing things head-on seems too much. The odd hours began discreetly. A meeting here, a flat tire there, a visit to the mechanic who, curiously, always closed later than usual. At first, I believed. Not out of naivete, but because it's more comfortable to trust than to suspect the person sleeping next to you. But the body feels what the heart takes time to understand. A woman senses when something changes. She doesn't need proof or a fuss. It's in the way he fiddles with his phone, the way he looks away when he asks how your day was, as if he no longer cares about the answer. It's in the absence of questions, in the silences that stretch too long during dinner. Before, he'd listen to every detail I told him about the grandchildren, the garden, the new recipe I'd tried. Then, he'd just nod, lost somewhere else I couldn't reach. There was a day, I remember well, when I let the cake burn in the oven. It was apple and cinnamon, a recipe that never went wrong. But that day, I was looking at him through the living room window, talking on the phone in the car. I laughed. I laughed in that light, intimate way I hadn't laughed with myself in a while. I felt a pang in my stomach, as if something had broken completely, even without a sound. From then on, the details began to scream. the shirt laundered with a different perfume, the wallet always kept in his coat pocket, no longer on the entryway table, the rush to shower as soon as he arrived, the physical distance, but more than that, the mental. It was as if there were an invisible wall between us, made of everything he didn't say and everything I pretended not to know. But denial comes at a price, and the price is high. You start to doubt yourself. You wonder if you're imagining things, if you're exaggerating. You start to keep quiet for fear of being called crazy, jealous, insecure. And this silence slowly eats away at you until one day you wake up and realize you no longer recognize yourself, that you've molded yourself so much to keep others comfortable that you've stopped listening to your own intuition. And intuition, oh, it never fails. It's like a silent alarm ringing only inside you, sometimes subtle, sometimes deafening, but real, always real. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject because what really hurts me, looking back, wasn't what he did. It was what I failed to do for myself. All the times I swallowed hard, smiled to avoid conflict, dressed to please, kept quiet to maintain harmony in the house. The hidden truth behind my reluctance to see it was fear. Fear of starting over, fear of loneliness, fear of judgment. And it's this fear that traps so many women in relationships that have already faded inside. But the truth, however harsh, liberates. The truth has the power to break cycles. And it was behind the scenes of these silences that my transformation began, even without me realizing it. Because every time something bothered me, and I pretended it didn't, my body held it back. And there comes a time when the body demands it, in the form of unexplained fatigue, tears hidden in the bathroom, entire nights staring at the ceiling, trying to understand where we went astray. I wish I had spoken sooner. I wish I had asked, "Do you still love me?" But pride, fear of the answer, and the hope that everything would go back to the way it was before held me back. The impact of all this was silent, but profound. It changed the way I saw myself, the way I positioned myself, the way I cared for myself, and even without meaning to, I was preparing myself for change. Because every decision starts small. An afternoon, you choose to go out alone. A Sunday, you decide not to make lunch. A compliment you give yourself when you look in the mirror. That's how we begin to reconnect. And it was there, in the empty spaces he left, that I found my own voice again. Comment below, "I'm noticing the signs," just so I know you can feel it too when something changes. There's still more I need to share with you. It was a muggy Thursday afternoon. I remember it because the sky was heavy, the kind that threatens rain but never delivers. The house was silent, except for the old living room fan, which made an intermittent, almost irritating noise. I had decided to tidy up the dresser in our bedroom, the one with the deep drawers that for years had accumulated more memories than useful things. In the third drawer, among old receipts, a broken chain, and papers that no longer made sense, I found the envelope. Crumpled at the edges, with a poorly folded design, it seemed like a silly, forgotten thing. But as soon as I saw the handwriting, delicate, round, with an almost youthful touch, my heart skipped a beat. His name was written in the top corner. No addressee, just a "for you" in the middle. I sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were shaking. I read the letter slowly, as if part of me was still trying not to understand. She spoke of longing, of encounters that were too quick, of repressed desires. And at the end, she signed it with a heart, a heart. There, in that moment, the penny dropped. It wasn't just the betrayal that had hit me. It was time. 32 years. 32. I saw myself as if in a movie playing at high speed. The marriage, the children, the Christmases, the fights, the reconciliations, the good days and the so-so days, all of it passing in a blur, while I held that piece of paper that seemed to hold more power than the entire history we'd built together. The ground didn't shake. The house didn't spin. I didn't cry. I just stood still, as if I'd stepped outside my own body and observed myself from the outside. The woman standing there, with her swollen feet, her blouse stained with bleach, the ring on her finger, wasn't the same one he'd described in his early letters. And yet, it was me, the same one who stayed, the same one who believed. I don't know how long I sat there, maybe minutes, maybe hours. I know that when I stood up, something inside me had changed. It wasn't an explosion. It was silence. A silence unlike any other I've ever known. It was a silence of rupture, of the end of a cycle, of naked truth which doesn't need to be screamed to hurt. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because the pain of discovery, however devastating, brings with it a rare kind of lucidity. It's as if, in an instant, everything that was blurry becomes clear. You see the details you ignored, the excuses you accepted, the versions you embraced just to avoid facing reality. And this clarity, though cruel, is also liberating. The emotional impact of that moment ripped through me in a way no other experience had before. I didn't just feel sadness. I felt humiliation, anger, shame, and, above all, a profound sense of having been discarded, as if everything I was had lost its value, as if my dedication, the years of partnership, the small, everyday gestures, had been invisible. And perhaps that was the most painful part, realizing that, somewhere along our journey, he stopped seeing me. I was still there, present, doing what I always did, caring, keeping the house alive, nourishing the rituals. But to him, I had become part of the furniture, too familiar to be noticed, too convenient to be valued. But there, with that card in hand, the tables turned. Not immediately, of course, but it was in that moment that my mindset began to shift. I began to see not only him, but myself with new eyes. I began to question my own decisions, the boundaries I'd never set, the signals I'd ignored. And I realized that, although he had betrayed me, I had also betrayed myself on numerous occasions, giving up what I felt, what I wanted, what I needed, just to maintain the illusion that everything was okay. That letter was the revelation that tore the veil, and like all painful truths, it brought to light others that had been dormant. I began to remember so many small situations that in isolation seemed trivial, but together formed a portrait of an unbalanced relationship. Things I minimized, situations I justified, words I swallowed. But the truth is, no one deserves to live on emotional crumbs. Love, when it's real, doesn't leave us feeling inferior. It may not be perfect, and it shouldn't be, but it needs to be true. It needs to be presence, care, choice, every day. And in that paper, full of secret promises, was proof that I was no longer a choice. I was just part of the structure that sustained his double life, and that was what hurt the most. Write down, I deserve more than crumbs, because recognizing this is the first step toward taking control of your own story. There's still more I need to share with you. I went 3 days without eating. 3. The food lost its taste. The body felt heavy, but it was the soul that ached. I would sit on the barn bench, the same one where I'd so often watched my grandchildren run, where I'd stored old Christmas decorations and toys that no longer made any noise. There, hidden among hay and memories, I cried, Shorty, barely breathing. It wasn't just sadness. It was a dense mixture of pain, shame, and humiliation, as if everything I believed in had melted away before me, and I didn't know where to begin to pick up the pieces. I didn't tell anyone, not at that moment. It was as if I said it out loud, it all became even more real. And the cruelest thing was that even after reading that letter, even after knowing what he'd done, I still loved him. I still expected to hear the door open and see him walk in with a bouquet of apologies. I knew it was wishful thinking, but I couldn't stop my mind from fantasizing. It was love resisting, even when hurt. Or maybe it was just the habit of waiting. The worst part wasn't the pent-up scream. It was the silence he didn't notice. 3 days without eating, and he didn't notice. 3 days sleeping with his back to me, and he didn't feel the distance. Indifference hurts more than insult, because it erases you. It dehumanizes you. I looked in the mirror and saw nothing. No anger, no strength, no color. Her face was haggard, her eyes dull. It seemed like the woman I once was gone, and maybe it did. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because rock bottom isn't just a place. It's a state of mind. It's when we stop fighting even with ourselves. It's when hope, the one that always insists on staying, decides to take a nap. I felt small, insignificant, disposable, and worse, guilty. As if I had done something to deserve this. As if, at some point, I had stopped being good enough. And that's when I began to realize the hidden truth behind my pain. It wasn't just him who had betrayed me. I had betrayed myself too. How many times did I keep quiet about what hurt? How many times have you smiled when you wanted to cry? How many times have I put his wishes before mine, thinking that was love? The mindset that held me captive for years was built silently, with bricks of renunciation. I thought giving in was a virtue, that enduring was proof of character, that not complaining was a sign of maturity. But it wasn't. It was fear. It was abandonment, disguised as strength. And when it all fell apart, I found myself alone. Not because he had walked out the door, but because I no longer recognized myself. There, in the middle of that barn, with the smell of damp wood and the sound of the world continuing outside, I began to understand that something needed to change. Not for him, for me. The journey to finding yourself again begins at this point, when you realize that your pain doesn't define you, but reveals where you lost yourself. And it was there, between suppressed sobs and confused thoughts, that the first decision was born. I needed to get up. I didn't know how, not even when, but I knew that staying there, invisible even to me, was no longer an option. On that fourth day, I went to the kitchen. I made coffee. Simple, strong. The scent embraced me in a way nothing else had in the last few days. I drank slowly, with hands still trembling, but with something different inside his chest. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. It was a beginning. Right there. I deserved to come back to myself, because deep down, the strength we seek outside has always been within. There's still something I need to share with you. It was my granddaughter who woke me up, the youngest, with big, curious eyes, the kind that seemed to see right into your soul. She came into the kitchen slowly, mid-morning, when I'd already been there for a while, stirring the cold coffee with no real intention of drinking it. She came closer, watched me for a few seconds in silence, and said softly, with the frankness only children possess, "Grandma, you stopped smiling." At that moment, my chest tightened, as if that simple sentence had shattered everything I was trying to hold together. I swallowed hard. I smiled slightly just to hide it, but the lump in my throat didn't go away. She sat down beside me and began drawing with a pencil forgotten on the table. She sketched flowers, birds, a house with a chimney, and trees bearing red berries. That scene took me straight to a place inside me I hadn't visited in a long time, a place where hope still resided. There, sitting next to that girl who just wanted to see her grandmother again, I realized what was at stake. It wasn't just my marriage. It was my very essence, my spirit, my presence, my ability to be a beacon for those who love me. And in that moment, I felt I needed to change, not just for myself, but for her too, for all those who see me as a root, as a shelter, as a mirror. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because true transformation doesn't begin with big decisions. It begins with small gestures that awaken something dormant. And that phrase, "You stopped smiling," was like a key that turned, silently, inside my chest. I understood that continuing in that state of absence was a choice, that the pain had paralyzed me, yes, but that I still had within me the ability to move, even if slowly, even if afraid. That same night, I went to the old trunk in the sewing room. Inside, among scraps of fabric, old patterns, and colored thread, I found a dress I had made myself many years ago, a light blue dress with little daisies embroidered on the hem. It was from a time when I felt beautiful without needing approval, when I looked at myself in the mirror with ease, when I knew what I wanted. Holding that dress in my hands brought me back to that version of myself who knew how to smile with all my heart. Little by little, I reconnected with what made me feel good. I started walking in the mornings, even though my body still resisted. I put on music in the kitchen while washing the dishes, and I found myself humming without realizing it. I went back to tending my garden. The flowers were there, waiting for me to return, as if they knew I needed to rediscover beauty amidst the chaos, and I did. The impact of this shift was subtle at first, but powerful. It was as if every small gesture I made was a reminder, "You're still here." I no longer needed to wait for someone to validate me. I no longer needed to beg for emotional scraps. I could indeed rebuild from within, with my own hands, in my own way, in my own time. I started writing again. Simple things, loose thoughts, childhood memories, recipes with stories behind them. And each written word was a way of listening to myself, of naming what had previously been just confusion. Writing became my silent therapy. And that's how I realized that, even behind the scenes of pain, there was room for poetry. Memories of my youth also visited me. I saw myself sitting with my mother, hand sewing, listening to a battery-powered radio, and dreaming big. I saw myself dancing in the backyard with my friends, barefoot, with a light heart. And I began to wonder, at what point did I leave all that behind? When did I stop choosing myself? That question lingered in my head for days. Until one day, I did something simple. I put on lipstick, red, the kind he never liked. And when my granddaughter saw me, she said with a smile, "Now you look like your old grandmother." That's when I understood. She didn't want the old me because she thought it was better. She wanted Grandma with a sparkle in her eyes, with presence, with truth. And I also wanted that woman back. Comment below. I'm reconnecting with myself, because sometimes all we need is to remember who we always were before everything was lost. There's more I want to share with you. I woke up one Saturday with the smell of coffee filling the house and a new calm in my chest. It wasn't euphoria, it wasn't haste, it was steadiness. Something inside me had shifted. After so many days of dragging myself along, rediscovering myself, listening to myself in silence, I understood that I could no longer wait for life to go back to the way it was, because deep down, I no longer wanted it. What once served me, now squeezed me. That was the day I opened my sewing box, the old one, the dark wooden one that smelled of storage. My patterns were there, carefully folded, my pencil notes, still legible, the colored threads, some dusty, some intact. I took a deep breath and decided I was going to start over, but this time, my way. I got up, I sewed, I sold, I taught. I started out altering things for my neighbors, hemming Sunday dresses, zippers on pants no one else wanted to fix. Then came the requests for custom clothing. Skirts, aprons, dresses in floral fabrics, all handmade, with care, with authenticity. Orders began to grow slowly, almost like a whisper from life saying, "See, you still know." I set up my shop right there, in the backyard. I took the old wooden porch, cleaned it, painted it, and hung a sign I made, "Sewing with Soul." Nothing fancy, but it was my space, my name, my rhythm. And before I knew it, the town was already talking about the woman who sewed unique pieces with details that seemed to tell stories. I wasn't just a seamstress. I was a point of reference, a place of listening, of exchange, of learning. Women came to visit me not just for the clothes, but because they knew there was a welcome there, that there, between needles and thread, wounds were also stitched together. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because empowerment, when it's silent, is often even more powerful. I didn't need to announce anything. I didn't shout for anyone to hear that I was starting over, but I did. And each decision I made gave me back a part of myself I thought I'd lost. I returned to teaching sewing to girls in the community, girls who, like me once, carried the world on their shoulders and dreams in their hearts. I saw in their eyes the same sparkle I had let slumber, and it was in that mirror that I understood. I wasn't just reconnecting with myself, I was also paving the way for others. The transformation wasn't about sewing clothes, it was about sewing myself, stitch by stitch, line by line, with patience, with pain, with beauty. Because rebuilding requires courage, but it also requires delicacy. I didn't need major achievements to feel valued. Every small victory, a satisfied customer, a word of support, a sincere thank you, reassured me that I was on the right path. My mindset has changed. Before, I thought I needed someone to validate me. Today, I know I'm enough, that I can create, offer, inspire, and all without losing myself. And don't think it was easy. I was afraid. I had doubts. I had sleepless nights wondering if I was doing the right thing. But I kept going, because the act of getting up has an impact that reverberates throughout everything. It's like throwing a stone into a lake. The ripple that forms reaches places we never imagined. Behind the scenes of this comeback, I also rediscovered my femininity. I started dressing with care. I started wearing perfume just because I liked the smell. I started dressing up for myself. Not so anyone would notice me, but so I could feel good in my own skin. And that's when I realized true empowerment. It's not about not feeling pain. It's about not letting pain define who you are. Write it down. I'm rebuilding myself inside and out, because this journey has room for each of us, in our own time, in our own way. There's still more I need to share with you. Today, my brand is at fairs throughout the state. And him? Well, he was in the past, not with anger, nor with resentment. It was like a book you read until the last page, and, even with pain, close knowing you needed to finish. I never thought I'd be saying this one day, that I'd feel more whole after the storm than I had in all those years of just pretending to be okay. But the truth is, when we decide to come back to ourselves, the world comes back too, in a different way, with a different light. People started recognizing my work. A lady from Savannah came to my booth at a fair and said, "I bought this dress here last summer. Every time I wear it, people ask me where I got it." And I smiled, not just at the compliment, but because I understood there was more to it than just a piece of clothing. There was a story woven with pain, yes, but also with rebirth. With each new design I create, I think of women who, like me, at some point, forgot who they were, who gave up themselves to fit into someone else's life. And that's why each of my seams carries purpose. They're not just dresses, they're lightweight armor, they're embraces in the form of fabric, they're memories delicately reconstructed. Today I walk the city streets with a different attitude, no longer with the rush of someone constantly trying to please, but with the lightness of someone who has rediscovered themselves. My clothes bear my signature, but so does my life, and that is priceless. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there's a kind of peace that only comes after pain teaches you. It's the kind of peace that doesn't depend on applause, company, or external recognition. It's the peace that comes from knowing you survived, that you've hit rock bottom and come back up on your own 2 feet. And that's exactly how it happened to me. I started taking care of the house again, but now with a different perspective. Every corner began to reflect who I am today, not what I once was trying to please someone. I changed the curtains. I hung new paintings. I created a wall dedicated to photos of my grandchildren and quotes that remind me not to forget myself. And the most beautiful thing was realizing that life also began to give me back what I thought I'd lost. I'm not talking about a new love. That doesn't rush me. I'm talking about presence, about true friendships, about afternoons filled with tea and warming conversations, about listening to loud music in the kitchen without waiting for anyone to come back. As for him, well, he tried to come back. A few months after the breakup, he looked for me with that old look of someone who thinks he still has space. He told me he missed our routine, the food, the smell of the house, me. But by that time, I had already found myself again. I was no longer the same. And what once would have broken me, this time strengthened me. I looked at him with compassion, not with resentment. I said I forgave him, not for him, but for me. Because carrying a grudge would be like sewing with loose thread. Sooner or later, everything comes undone. And I didn't want anything else that was unraveling. I wanted firmness. And it was there, in that conversation, that I realized the difference between remembering and reliving. I remember what I experienced, everything. The pain, the love, the betrayal, the surrender. But I don't relive it, because today I choose to be in the present. I choose to be with myself. Women of my generation were taught that love was synonymous with sacrifice, that the beautiful thing was to endure, to keep the house standing at any cost. But that narrative no longer serves me. I can love and still put myself first. I can be generous without sacrificing myself. I can care without abandoning myself. This is the greatest reward, being the protagonist of my own story again. Knowing that nothing I've experienced has been in vain, but also knowing that I don't have to live on leftovers. And it's not about owning a store or recognition. It's about smiling from the inside out again, about regaining the sparkle in my eyes, about hearing my granddaughter say, "Grandma, now you're truly happy, aren't you?" Comment below, "Now it's about me," because there's a silent power in choosing yourself. And there's still more I want to tell you. Sometimes, pain comes to push us towards the light. He betrayed me? Yes, but in the end, he set me free. And no, that's not a cliché. It's the truth I discovered after going through a darkness that seemed endless, and coming out the other side more aware, more whole, more myself. For a long time, I believed that love was about holding on, keeping the home, keeping the peace, keeping the other person happy. But no one had taught me that love is also about holding on, staying true to yourself, staying present in your own life, staying awake. Today, when I look back, I no longer see a destroyed woman. I see a woman who was forced to stop, to fall, to lose herself, and who chose, with courage and kindness, to reinvent herself. Every tear I shed created space for something new to be born. Every silence I endured became space for my own voice to flourish. This journey taught me that the impact of a fall doesn't define what comes next. What defines it are the choices we make once we're on the ground. And I chose to get up. I chose not to be a secondary character in my own story. I chose to transform what could have broken me into something that built me. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because when we talk about betrayal, everyone thinks about the pain. And yes, it's real. It hurts in a way that only those who have experienced it understand. But few people talk about what comes after, the phase when you wake up and realize you survived, the moment you look in the mirror and, for the first time in a long time, see a woman with a sparkle in her eyes, even if the pain still lingers. It is at this point in the journey that grief begins to give way to awareness. And then you understand. It's not just about him leaving or about him staying, but not really being there. It's about what you're going to do with everything that's been revealed. The hidden truth of pain is that it is often the only force strong enough to make us move from what was already settled. I needed to see everything fall apart to understand that that marriage had not welcomed me for years. I needed to have my heart broken, to learn to listen to myself, and I needed to feel invisible to remember that my presence has value. None of this was easy, but today, I can say with complete calm, it was necessary. Not to justify what he did, because cheating is never an excuse, but to honor the woman I've become, a woman who understands her limits, who respects her intuition, who knows that silence is also an answer, but who now chooses to speak. When I talk to other women who have been through something similar, I feel a silent connection. It doesn't matter the age, the city, the context. There's a pain that runs through us all equally. But there's also a hidden strength, there behind the scenes of our daily lives, waiting for the chance to reveal itself. And I want you to understand one thing. This strength is already within you. It doesn't need to be created, just awakened. Sometimes it's a word that lights the mood, a hug, a memory, a wish. Sometimes it's the simple act of taking a deep breath and saying, enough. Enough of diminishing yourself. Enough of accepting little. Enough of keeping quiet. Because every transformation begins with a decision. The size of the step doesn't matter. What matters is the direction. And the right path, most of the time, is the one that takes you back to yourself. If today I feel lighter, firmer, more alive, it's not because I've forgotten what happened. It's because I've made peace with my history. And when we make peace with history, life changes its tone. It becomes more true, more serene, more ours. Comment below. The pain woke me up, but I was the one who got up. Because sometimes just writing that down already starts to change you inside. There's something important I still need to tell you. Life doesn't usually warn you when it's going to turn upside down. It just does. It knocks us off our feet, messes everything up, forces us to reevaluate what seemed right. And when that happens, there are two possible paths. Either you surrender to the pain and lose yourself for good, or you embrace it as a chance, albeit a fearful one, to rebuild yourself. I chose to remake myself, with the pieces that were left, with the parts that hurt, with everything I was and everything I could still be. And if this story reached you in some way, if it touched an old wound, or if it lit a little light that might have been extinguished inside you, I want to tell you, this could also be the beginning of your turning point. Because it doesn't matter why you fell. What matters is what you do when you get back up. And sometimes it all starts with a conversation like this. A story that seemed to be just mine, but suddenly seems a little bit like yours too. This is the power of connection. We find each other in pain, but we heal together through courage. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because every time a woman decides to rise up, even after being broken, she creates a crack in the logic of silence. She challenges the idea that only those who don't make mistakes, who don't feel, who don't fail, are worthy. The truth is, we've all had our dark days. Days when we can barely get out of bed, when we feel ashamed of ourselves, when we doubt our worth. But we also have days when, even though we're trembling, we step out the door, when we take a deep breath and say, "Today, I'm starting over." These moments, as simple as they may seem, are powerful. They don't come with background music or applause. They come silently, like an intimate, almost whispered decision. But that's where the twist lies, in choosing to continue, even when everything hurt, in the decision to believe, even after being betrayed, wanting to smile again, and this time, for real. And if you've ever experienced something like this, tell me about it. Tell me in the comments what your turning point was. It could have been a word, a gesture, a hug, or even a disappointment that forced you to see life through different eyes. Because when we share the journey, we become stronger. And, who knows, maybe your story will also become a light for someone who is in the dark right now. Comment below. My turning point began when... 1. And fill in whatever comes from your heart. There's still more I want to share with you. If you've stuck with me this far, I can only thank you for listening with an open heart. It was an intense, layered story. And knowing you stuck with me until the end, that says a lot about the connection we've created. If this content touched you in any way, if it brought clarity, strength, or even some relief from feeling understood, subscribe to the channel. Here, we continue to have real conversations, the kind that move you from the inside and, little by little, help transform you from the outside as well. Leave a comment saying, "I'm with you until the end," just so I know you've walked with me through every part of this story. I read everything with great affection, and if this video touched you in any way, leave a like, not for the gesture itself, but because it shows that this kind of exchange makes sense, that there are people on the other side feeling, reflecting, and transforming together. There's a video here that complements this topic. Click and continue with me there. Our conversation isn't over yet.